So this video essentially is going to be about brows. Everything to do with brows, brow products, how they're meant to be used, what kind of brows they're for, and everything in between. First off, I'm going to start by talking through from lightest, which is going to kind of be like your brow powders, and then leading into pencils, and then your heavier stuff. I'm going to go through each single one and explain to you what they're for and how they work. So the first guy is your brow powder. Now this guy is more for a soft diffused finish, and this is especially for someone who just likes a really soft natural brow. It's going to define, but it's also going to look very, very minimal. Okay, so first things first, we're doing powder. I'm going to take a spoolie and I'm just going to brush them up a little first, just so I can kind of see where I'm going to be needing to fill them in. I generally like to angle my brows upwards, so my tail kind of sits going towards my hairline. And we're going to need a little angled brush. So something like this size, generally I prefer that. I'm going to take a little bit of the powder on the brush, tap off a little bit, and then I'm just going to start filling in any kind of gaps. Cool. I usually angle the brush the same way that the hair grows. So from this point back, everything is going to be angled going backwards. The minute I get to the front of the brow, I take the tip and I actually start to flick upwards. The more that you follow the natural growth of the hair, the more likely it's going to look more natural anyway. But powder is the softest form anyway, so I tend to prefer this if I'm just looking for like a super natural brow. Cool. And then lastly, spoolie again, and I take that back through the brows just to kind of comb everything out, make everything look less harsh. And that is a powder brow. Okay, so the next ones I'm going to be talking about are micro pencils. This is also inclusive of like a regular pencil, except these guys now mostly are mechanical. And the reason being is because they're a little bit more of a precise pencil, and they're essentially designed to mimic fine hair. So this is a great step up from the powder, but also it's going to be a little bit more intense, but still on the natural side. Okay, so next one we're doing is the micro pencil. This guy already has a little bit of a spoolie on the end, so I'm just going to take that and run that through again, upwards. And then I'm going to take the little tip. I usually only draw it a little bit at a time. These are super, super fragile, so less is more. And then I actually just start to take it the same way I did with the powder, flicking it through any gaps. This guy will obviously give you a little bit more of a strong definition per se compared to the powder. But again, still can be super natural depending on how heavy or how light-handed you are. And this guy, you can definitely create a little bit more shape. So for me, I have less of a tail, so I would kind of pull it out just a fraction. And then up. And then again, when I'm getting to the front, I actually flick upwards. And I kind of drag it in just a little more. The more the brows are closer to the nose, the more likely your nose will look smaller. Little life tip. Cool. And then again, brushing out with the spoolie. This will kind of help soften it so it's less striking with the lines. And then again, if you feel like you've rubbed out anywhere else, you can literally just like go back in and retouch up. I actually really love micro pencils. They're some of my faves. And that is a micro pencil brow. Okay, and then moving along to your larger style crayons. These can either be a pencil or a crayon, same as the original micro ones that are mechanical, but these are obviously going to be probably a little bit more pigmented. They're a larger style wand as well, so they can end up leading to a more fuller, blockier brow. If you use it correctly, it's fine.
So I've actually used 2 different jumbo pencils here today. I've got the jumbo pencil in the Benefit. So this guy is 10 times more pigmented, as you can see. And on top of that, it's actually a little bit more rounder. So you find the strokes tend to be a little bit thicker as well.
Which is why I always have to kind of buff them back with a spoolie. And then again. So if you're not into a dark brow, don't grab these type of pencils. Whew. Baby. This is more of like a Cara Delevingne brow, but that is the darker pencil.
The Hourglass Arch pencil is actually triangular, so the tip is actually designed to be used 3 different ways.
Okay, so these 2 are your thicker style pencils like we discussed before. The first one I have is the Hourglass. So this guy is actually in the shape of like a little triangle, like I said before. So this guy is going to be used slightly different to the Benefit one, but I am going to show you with both just for beneficial purposes. The first one, again, similar like micro, always brushing upwards. I love that the Hourglass pencils actually have the spoolies on them. That's quite rare. And then this guy is actually used almost like a big jumbo pencil to fill in. So the base of the pencil, which is the fatter side, is going to be the chubby side. So we're going to fill in going back and forth. These pencils often make the brows look quite heavier and quite denser, which is the idea. These are great for someone who either has quite naturally full brows already and they like them quite sharp and defined, or someone who pretty much has like barely any brows and they do want to really thicken them up. So coating them going back and forth between the hair actually allows the product to get in there. And then once you've kind of got the desired density, you flip it over to the little thinner side and you start actually filling in. So I always like to tell people this particular brow pencil is one of my favorites because it actually has like 3 different pencils in one. Each different side of this actually gives off a different effect on the brow. Fixing up any edges or gaps. And obviously you can see that this brow is a lot thicker and a lot denser than the other 2. Okay, so that's the micro, that's the arch brow pencil from Hourglass.
Okay, so now we're moving on to something a little bit more unique, I guess. This guy here is the MAC Shade and Tint brow pencil. Now this is designed to have a crayon on one end and the other side is actually an ink put into a felt tip pen. It sounds crazy, but it actually works. This is designed to reflect something more like a microbladed brow. So it's going to be very, very fine strokes, but it is a texture, so it can be really intimidating to use.
Okay, so this one is the brow blade style of pen. So this guy is in a felt tip shape and it's like a big texture essentially for the brow. So again, I'm going to take the little spoolie and I'm going to comb my brows up. And then I'm going to take that blade and I'm going to use it very lightly against the skin where the gaps are. So, for example, you can see this ink is pretty hardcore. So you definitely wouldn't want to go overboard with this. And this one you have to do little feather-like strokes. If you don't, essentially it's going to look like this, which we don't want. So, for keepsake, I'm going to do it at the front and just show you what it would look like without the harsh lines. Don't mind the back end. So I'm just going with the actual growth of the hair again. And then spoolie. I'm going to try and alleviate this bit here so I don't look ridiculous. But, okay, there we go. So you can see it actually looks more like a bladed brow pretty much, which is kind of like the trend of the micro needling and all that kind of stuff. And it's definitely a lot more stronger than, say, a pencil, but it can be really, really, really fiddly. So if you're not really confident with using like a heavy brow pencil or even a texter for that matter, I definitely wouldn't recommend these as a first timer. This is something that's definitely more for someone who actually knows what they're doing with their brows. And that is the bladed brow.
Okay, so let's talk brow gels. So I've got a couple of different ones here. The first ones I'm going to go through are actually the tinted brow gels, and these actually have a little bit of a microfiber built in them. Now this is designed to boost volume because it's going to cling to the hair. So the pigment's there, but it's also got those little extra fine strokes of microfiber to build up the volume so your brows can look super full and bushy.
Okay, so the next one is the gel. These are probably some of my favorites. This one is tinted though, so let's start with the tinted and then we'll work our way to the clear. The first one I have here is the Benefit, what is this called again? I've actually blanked. I think it's the Cabrow. Anyway, we'll work that out later. But the other one that I have here, which is pretty famous, is the Boy Brow from Glossier. So these, unfortunately, you can't get in Australia, and I apologize, but they are friggin' amazing. I have two shades here. So the first color I'm gonna use is Blonde. These are actually quite dark. I had the darker one, and unfortunately, it's just a little bit too dark for my brow hair. So I'll show you the blonde. These are really, really foolproof for someone who doesn't want a lot of product in their brow, something super quick and easy, but also something pretty effective in like 2 seconds. So this one here, you can see it has like little volumizing fibers. I don't even know if you can see that, but it's got little volumizing fibers on it, and what it does is it actually clings to the natural hair and makes them look really full in like 3 seconds. You can get a little more fancy and actually use 2 different tints, but I'm too lazy for that shit. But let's just show for reference today. I'm gonna use the darker one on the tail end of my brow to help darken them a little bit and let that fade into the lighter one at the front. Like so. So you can still achieve a pretty dark brow with these. I would definitely recommend these for people though who have brow hair. If you don't have a lot of hair, it's not going to cling to anything. This is not made for the skin. It is made predominantly for the brow hair. Same with the Benefit one. This one actually has little fibers built in as well, but it's got a little bit more of like a fine tipped point. So it's a little bit more precise, but I find these colors are a little bit dark for me. I think this is a shade 3 that I have in this, and it's like pretty hardcore. But these are usually what I reach for every day because they're so quick and easy. And that is a brow gel.
Okay, and then we've got your more clear brow gels. So the first one here that I've got is the Surratt Pomade Brow Gel. Now this is actually more of a wax formula and it's designed to lift and shape. It does look like glue though. The second one is your Hourglass Clear Brow Gel. This is a very traditional brow gel and essentially it's like hair gel but for the brows. So it's just there to kind of lock everything in place, hold some structure. Not that that always works, but that's the idea.
The first brow gel is the Hourglass Brow Shaping Gel. This is completely clear, so there's nothing else in it. And it's kind of like hair gel, literally, but for the brows. So this guy actually has 2 different sides to the actual wand. So the top wand is there to help kind of like tame and shape, and then the bottom is there to add volume. I generally don't care for clear brow gels, to be quite honest. I do like them. I think they have a place in the brow realm. But aside from that, it needs to have really strong hold, particularly for me because I have quite a heavy full brow, very natural brow. The second one that I actually really, really love is from Surratt. And they call this one the Expressionist Brow Pomade. Now this actually looks really scary because it looks like white PVC glue. Is that what they used to call it? I think they did. Anyway, so this is like literal gel, but like this is hardcore. So it does look super white there, but once you actually apply it to the skin, it completely disappears, which I think is pretty dope. This I would only really use if I was like hell lazy and I wasn't bothered filling in my brows and I just wanted to hold them up. Kind of like a bit of a lamination in a sense. But aside from that, it doesn't do anything for color, anything for shape really, aside from pushing them up a bit hardcore. And that's pretty much it. So I do love these, but I would only really use these if I don't care for brows and filling them in, or if I'm just looking to kind of shape them first with a pencil and then lock them in place. And that's it.
Okay, and then this is the more extreme style of brow gel in a sense. So this is a soap brow and I've also got a wax pencil here. Soap brows are literally just traditional clear soap in a tin. The other one, your wax pencil, is designed obviously in a pencil form, so you can literally push the wax from the pencil into the brow hairs going upwards and then spoolie them down. Both these are probably the strongest form of hold that you can find in the brow department.
Okay, so the next product is your soap style. So this is literal straight soap, except the difference here is obviously they give it a fancy cute name and a cute tin. This is literal straight up soap. This is something that you would find in the supermarket for like $1, but obviously I had to buy the fancier one. So this one actually requires a little bit of water in there. So I take like a little mist and a spoolie, literally rubbing it into the product. And then once it's kind of built up on the spoolie enough, you literally run it through the brows. Same way that you would with the wax, except this obviously just needs to be the right tackiness. If you put too much water, you're gonna see little soap chunks all through the brow. So be wary of that as well. I love brow soap though. This is actually such a cool invention. It's been around for years, but people always think, you know, there's brow gels, it's way more fancy, blah, blah, blah. This is actually one of the best products to use to really hold brows. And you can see like I've barely used any, and I've slicked it up with a little spoolie, and in like 2 seconds, it's not moving. Soap sets, it's the same as when people go to like block out their brows, they use soap because soap doesn't move. So I personally really love soap brows. Obviously you don't need to purchase something like this. You could buy literal soap, but again, same idea, same concept.
Okay, and last but not least, the heaviest form of brow product is the pomade. I'm sure you've seen this around all over Instagram. This is definitely for more of an Instagram brow. This is a long wear waterproof formula. This is from Anastasia Beverly Hills. Generally, this is probably the most iconic. And essentially the idea was to make them either look like fine strokes of hair, or you can actually build the intensity by really layering the product in there.
Okay, so again, this one obviously requires a bit of a spoolie, but I'm gonna show you how to use it lightly first, which is the actual way it's meant to be used. And then I'm also gonna show you how to do it much heavier, if that's your jam. So obviously you're gonna need a little angled brush. I use like a little angled one from MAC. This is a really nice fine point, so that's why I like this one a lot. So I'm gonna pick up a little bit of the product. Sometimes I use the back of my hand to take off any excess because obviously like this product needs to be warm in order to actually work. Okay, so my brows are pretty waxy right now, but let's just make it work. I'm gonna push them up first, again. Okay, and then I'm gonna take the very tip of the brush, and the same way that I did with the brow blade, I'm actually gonna wean it in between all these little gaps. And then following the natural growth of my hair, working my way down. I actually really like the effect of this. I don't normally reach for my pomade, but it is pretty effective, and I feel like it became pretty popular on Instagram for a really long time, so I kind of just stopped using it. But I pulled it out recently and started using it how it's meant to be used, and I've kind of re-fallen in love with it. But this one can get super dark super quickly, so it's quite dangerous. So then I go back to my hand and I pick up just a tiny bit more. And then when I get to the front, again, I'm going upwards. Again, though, I'm being like ridiculously light-handed with this. And I'm just using the very tip of the brush. And I'm using like my pinky leaning on my nose to kind of give me a little bit more balance. I find that's the easiest way to find stability, because if you start going a little bit wonky with this, it gets a bit wild. Okay, so that would be like if I was to use it gently. And then finally brush it out. Okay, so let's turn this brow into like full Insta brow. Okay, so I'm gonna dip back into the pot, pick up a little bit more. Don't need much though, because obviously this is like crazy pigmented. And then this is probably what you'd see generally on Instagram. Instead of actually using little fine strokes, you're actually gonna start literally shaping out the brow. I have not done my brows like this since I was like 19. So I'm pretty much literally like shaping the entire brow based on the outside. Once the outside shape is on, you're like literally just filling in whatever's in the middle. But this is quite a popular brow.
And now, expresses it musically himself.
Not for me. And then again, at the front, you're just kind of using whatever's left on the brush. Okay. And then finally, clean up any harsh lines, even though it's an entirely harsh line. So this would be like a more hardcore dip brow. And as you can see, I look ridiculous. But anyway, this is definitely not my cup of tea, but I know some people like to have quite like a heavy dark brow, especially if they have like barely any brows or really, really light colored brows as well. So this doesn't need anything on top of it. It actually does set on its own. Like this stuff is like paint, it won't move, but you can obviously use something else on top, like a brow gel or a brow wax if you wanted to. I personally wouldn't though. This is pretty waxy itself and it'll actually just stay in place all day. So this is definitely a really good quality product. It's just, if you've got a heavy hand, it's not gonna go well for you. But that is a dip brow.